now that we have talked about the developing of the atria, now it's about the ventricles. So basically, what we have, the first step is that muscular interventricular septum forms. Opening is called interventricular foramen. So this is the structure that we're looking at. So left atrium is done, right atrium is done. We already talked about it. So what we have now is the two ventricles. This is the left ventricle, this is the right ventricle, and there is something in between that we are talking about. It just looks like the outside, looks like the same thing as the wall of the heart. So basically, that's another reason to know it's a muscular interventricular septum. So it's a septum that is between the two ventricles, but actually it's not closing the whole space, so they're still connected somehow. So this is called the muscular interventricular septum, and the opening, this whole opening between the left and right ventricle, is called interventricular foramen. So that's for the first step, that's for the first thing, and they're still connected together, and the connection is called interventricular foramen. And for these small things here, they are the atrioventricular canals. So they're basically the place where the left atrium gives the blood through to the left ventricle. So they are the connection point between the ventricles and the atria, so they can get blood from the atria. So that's one. For two, it says that the aorticopulmonary septum rotates and diffuses with muscular ventricular septum to form membranous interventricular septum, closing the interventricular foramen. So we have now a new structure that is developing, and that is called the aorticopulmonary septum. It's growing up here, and at the same time it's growing, it's rotating. So when it's rotating, it's creating something that fuses somehow, like goes downward and diffuses with the muscular interventricular septum. Okay, so that is basically the origin is aorticopulmonary septum. So this thing that is rotating and getting close to the muscular part is called membranous interventricular septum. So whenever it grows and ends up attaching and fusing to the muscle, that means this whole area is going to be not opened anymore. So so it's basically closing the interventricular foramina, which we know that it lies over here. So this is the foramina. It's going to be closed soon. That's in step 3, we're going to see. So the growth of endocardial cushions separates atria from both ventricles and contributes to both atrial septation and membranous portion of the interventricular septum. So what we have here is that the as we said, the aorticopulmonary septum is growing downwards, and it's forming the membranous interventricular septum that is attaching to the muscular parts. And now this ventricle is not attached with this ventricle anymore. So there's a complete separation of these ventricles. And at the same time, the endocardial cushion that we talked about earlier, it's this kind of half square that is changing in size and in shape, as in here. It keeps growing until it helps and contributes to the separation of the atria, like the left atrium and right atrium, and also with helps with the membranous portion of the interventricular septum. So it does a lot of contribution. This is a better image, I guess. These are the interventricular canals, and this is the growing, the yellow thing is the growing interventricular septum, and we have the membranous interventricular septum over here. It's attached to the muscular, and the rotation of the aorticopulmonary septum over here ends up as two separate ducts. The one is the developing ascending aorta, and the other one is the developing pulmonary tract. So for the outflow tract, it's basically the tract that takes blood out of the heart. We have the major source of this transformation is neural crest migration. So the neural crest migration leads to truncal and bulbar ridges that spiral and fuse to form aorticopulmonary septum. So that's one neural crest cell migration. Second, truncal and bulbar ridges that they do. Third thing, that they actually spiral and diffuse in order to finish with the aorticopulmonary septum. So this aorticopulmonary septum is the one that is going to rotate over here. It's this blue thing that's going to rotate, as we said, and it will somehow end as the ascending aorta and the pulmonary trunk. So if a problem happens here, then it's due to the failure of a neural crest cell's migration. So a defect in the first step leads to an abnormality called conotruncal abnormality. That is three T's. It's just the T letter out of each word: the transpositioning of raised arteries, the tetralogy of Fallot, and the persistent truncus arteriosus. For the valve development, we have four valves. The first two, they are the ones that take out the cardiac output out of the heart. They are derived from the endocardial cushions of outflow tract, while the other two, they are the mitral and tricuspid. They are between the atria and the ventricles, so they're inside the heart. They are derived from fused endocardial cushions of the AV canal. So if we have valvular anomalies, like it may be stenotic, it's just constriction, kind of constriction, or loss of elasticity, something like that. It just gets smaller, and regurgitant gets flappy, it doesn't close properly, and atretic, it doesn't form at all, like tricuspid dysplasia means there is no tricuspid valve at all, or it could be displaced as an Epstein anomaly. So these are the anomalies that we can have with valvular anomalies, like stenotic, regurgitant, atretic, and displaced. For the aortic arch derivatives, it's basically what does the aortic arch gives off by time. What does it develop into? So basically, it's aortic arch. So it's quite easy to know that it's going as arterial system. It's going to form some arteries. So it has actually 5 derivatives. The fifth one is just not there. So first, second, third, fourth, and sixth. There is no fifth. For the first one, it forms the aortic arch gives rise to the maxillary artery, and that is basically a branch of the external carotid artery. We'll know that. For the second branch, the aortic arch rises to form stapedial artery and hyoid artery. And for the third, the aortic arch gives rise to common carotid artery and the proximal part of internal carotid artery. So that shows here, it's the blue color. The blue color, as we said, it's common carotid artery. So this is left common carotid artery, the blue thing, and this is right common carotid artery. And of course, part of it is the internal carotid artery. For the fourth derivative that we have here, if it's on the left, then it only forms the aortic arch, as we're going to see. If it's on the right, then it also forms the proximal part of the right subclavian artery. So we're going to look at the purple color here. So this is the left side, and this is the right side. So the fourth derivative, if it's on the left, then it gives rise to the proximal part of subclavian artery. So this is the proximal part of the subclavian artery. I'm sorry, this is the left, so this should be the aortic arch. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. So this is on the left, so it just gives off the aortic arch. This is part of the aortic arch, while the on the right over here, it gives the proximal part of the right subclavian artery. And for the sixth derivative, it says that the proximal part, which means proximal to the heart, which is this green piece over here, it gives the proximal part of pulmonary arteries, and on the left, which is, this is the left side, as we said, this little triangle over here, it just the ductus arteriosus. Our ductus arteriosus is the duct that connects the pulmonary arteries, or pulmonary trunk actually, with the aorta. So, and that's it. Actually, we have here. So we know that in nerves we have two nerves: right recurrent laryngeal nerve and left recurrent laryngeal nerve. So for the right, it normally it loops around the product of the fourth arch. So in normal conditions, the right recurrent artery would loop around this part, and that is the product of the fourth derivative, while the left carotid artery in their normal or conditions, it will loop around the product of the sixth arch of the which is the arteriosus. So it would loop around here somehow, and this part, as we said, is part of the sixth derivative.